Thank you very much. I want to begin by showing you a picture. This is me, age 32, sitting at a desk reading the news to people across the country. A respectable journalist, a white-collar worker, an employee with a public profile who spent the July every year holidaying in Europe, Mykonos, Santorini, Paris, you name it. I went there. I lived in a fancy suburb and I even had enough money left after my Euro holidays to buy 2 houses by the age of 28. I mean, look at me. I look so polished and professional. To anyone looking at that picture, they would think that I was living the dream. Except that I wasn't. In reality, I was trapped in a nightmare. Because what that picture doesn't show is my chronic inner turmoil. I hated myself. I felt unworthy of my role and my friends. And I was using alcohol to bury my deep insecurities. I thought alcohol made me a better me. And I was in complete denial that I was an active and functional alcoholic, and it nearly killed me. Growing up, I was a shy and introverted young girl. I was the kind of girl who didn't have birthday parties because I didn't want to be the focus of attention. I felt awkward talking about myself, and I was drawn to louder people who did all the talking for me. For a long time, my inner monologue was, everyone's better than you, and you don't deserve this. I had my first proper alcohol binge at the age of 14. My friends and I were going to a dance party and we sat in a park drinking vodka mixers beforehand. And I can still remember that first taste. It was like the world lit up. At once, I became this person that I'd always wanted to be. Confident, funny, life of the party, outgoing. I even had things to say. Talitha had arrived. The theme for today's event is dare, and I think that night might be the first time I felt daring, but it certainly wasn't of the inspiring kind. The alcohol gave me a cloak of invincibility and allowed me to continually dare myself to transform into someone else. That binging continued throughout my teenage years and really ramped up when I began my career as a television journalist. It got steadily worse. It became my emotional crutch. I was a naturally timid young lady working in a career which required me to be the exact opposite. Well, they say your first live TV experience is up there with heart surgery and Last Judgment Day. Yes, I know it's not a real life or death experience, but let me tell you, I certainly felt like my vital organs were going to fail me at times. Let me talk you through it and I'll try not to have a panic attack just remembering back to that time. I'm sitting behind the news desk in the studio, bright lights shining in my face, a director talking into my ear. There's a 10-second countdown and I realise the doors to the studio are closed, there's silence throughout, and I start to hear that big bolshy news music that I've heard in different iterations since I was a kid playing. And then I recognise everything hangs on me. And it's simply terrifying. And of course, I've got all of this going through my head while I'm trying to act composed and pretend that everything's okay. I'm pleased to report that I did survive. I managed to get my first news bulletin out in comprehensive English and no major stumbles. But the second I walked into my door at home, I collapsed into myself. I remember drinking a bottle of wine pretty quickly, and it didn't even touch the sides. The adrenaline was just coursing through my body. Now, up until that point, I'd usually drink alcohol before a social situation, but this was the first time I used it after to celebrate a milestone in my career, and it felt amazing. It really emboldened me, and from that moment, all of the boundaries started to fade away. Booze was my saviour. It was my friend that I'd wheel out in any circumstances, social, parties, and to de-stress. Let's face it, as Aussies, it's a central part of our social engagements. And at the time, I just could not comprehend living without it. But soon my friend turned on me. Now, I don't know whether it happened gradually or very quickly, but I got to the point where I was coming home and drinking multiple bottles of wine every night. And when you're doing that, the embarrassing incidents in public begin to pile up. Among some of the shameful, being carried out of a media awards dinner and being hospitalised more than a number of times. One afternoon I read the 4:30 news and I went for a drink with a friend, and woke up on the pavement the next morning out the front of a terrace in Paddington. The emotional cycle of an alcoholic is depressingly repetitive and predictable. Step 1, drink until you pass out. Step 2, wake up the next morning and immediately start drowning in self-hatred and shame. Step 3, promise yourself you'll never get that drunk again. Step 4, forget step 3 and stay home and get really drunk by yourself where no one else can judge you. And return to step 1, wash, rinse and repeat every night. The tipping point for me was when work intervened. There was a weekend where I didn't turn up for work 2 days in a row. And on the Monday morning, the chief of staff at the TV network sat me down and just said, "You're not okay, are you?" And I said, "No." I mean, what else could I say? I had tried so hard and for so long to stop drinking, but I realised this time that it was serious. I decided that night to go to an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting in the city. I was told of one for business people that was recommended to me. I was almost as nervous as I was before reading my first news bulletin. It was terrifying walking in there, of owning up to an addiction that I'd been trying to hide from people for so long. But I sat in the corner hoping no one would notice me, but that's not how AA works. They told their stories of despair and recovery, and these people were strikingly respectable, honest, and selfless. I learnt that night that alcoholics are obsessed with alcohol and can't control how much they drink, no matter what it's doing in their home life, their work, or financially. I recognised myself in their stories, and it was really the jolt that I needed and the first step on a long journey of sobriety. And I was 33 years old. I was diagnosed with depression soon after that first AA meeting. Psychiatrists, medication, exercise, meditation, avoiding social situations, that all became the new norm for me. It's said that an addict stops maturing at the age that they start abusing their substance. And for me, that was 14, around the same age or not much older than most of you in this room. So I had a lot of growing up to do. And I realised that without the substance, alcohol, in my life, it was a terrifying realisation, really, that I had no idea who I was or what I was made of. For so long, I thought that I was the person that I was when I was drunk. So my new challenge and my new dare to myself was getting to know who I was without alcohol. So I started to say yes to situations that I'd normally run 100 miles from. Sometimes I was restless in the days and weeks leading up to them, but I pushed myself into those environments and I could really start to feel myself growing and maturing through each one, and it was so incredibly satisfying. And it taught me that confidence can be a learned behaviour. Without the fog of alcohol, I saw clearly who was important in my life, and those who weren't faded away. After an exhaustive process of self-discovery, I now realise there is goodness inside me, that I am a good person, and that I am good enough. I've learned to challenge that voice in my head that tells me that I'm unworthy and that I don't deserve anything. To be honest, that never actually goes away entirely. The difference is now that I know how to fight back and stop those insecurities from taking hold. Now, this new me has led me on a path to advocacy work. I am an ambassador for Hello Sunday Morning, as you heard, which is an organisation trying to change the culture of drinking in Australia, to make it so that it's a choice and not an expectation. I now have a little bubba, as you can see, and a little girl on the way, due at Christmas. And I hope that by the time they're drinking age, that this becomes a cultural norm for them. Through speaking out, I want to smash the stereotypes around addiction so that more people seek help. An alcoholic or addict can be anyone. It can be your mother, your doctor, your sister, your father. Addiction doesn't discriminate. For so long I used alcohol as a crutch because I thought it made me a better person. And now I hear so often many people telling me that they didn't like the Talitha who drank. So my message to you today is to get to know who you are, understand what you are made of, where your strengths are, where your weaknesses lie, and embrace all of it and dare to be who you truly are. Thank you.